Let me take one more sip of coffee. It's a serious matter.
It's very serious.
Drinking my coffee black today. That's how serious we are.
There you go, just like my men.
Classic.
Like my coffee, like I like my women. Finely ground in a plastic cup. Speaking of respecting women.
All right, that's where the podcast starts.
Yeah, we can't lose out on that joke.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an Eddie Izzard joke, but it's not mine.
Okay.
As much as I wish I were as funny as Eddie Izzard. Alright, so unfortunately the rest of the podcast probably isn't going to be as funny as Eddie Izzard.
Yeah, it's peaked now.
We're going to be talking about some serious business today.
Ooh.
Because I mentioned, like, on the very first Weebcast that I did, we were talking about Tenshi no 3P and Hajimete no Gal, and how they're, like, the kind of show that makes me ashamed to tell people what I do for a living. Because I feel like, especially among people who don't have that extensive knowledge of anime, that there's this association with hentai, and specifically the worst kinds of hentai, which is to say, child exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
And the industry doesn't do much to help with that perception, because we had Tenshi no 3P and Hajimete no Gal that season, which Tenshi no 3P was just a straight-up lolly show, and Hajimete no Gal had those,
to be fair, Tenshi no 3P was a relatively small show.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that they were some kind of, like, huge problem in and of themselves. They're just symptomatic of a deeper issue. And Hajimete no Gal wasn't bad in the same way. It just had that 1 to 3 pedophile characters who were played off as gags.
God damn.
So we had that show, those two shows that season. We have the Rio's Work Is Never Done this season. Before that season, we had Eromanga Sensei, which was just awful. Yeah, and I'm trying to think. I don't think we had one in the season in between summer and winter, which some would call fall.
Which some really
would call autumn.
Some random people call it fall.
Yeah, freaks. But no, it's just there are so many shows that try to use these elements of just sexualizing children, why mince words, as like jokes or plot points, like, and it's embarrassing and it's harmful, and I don't get it.
That's what I'd like to note. I forget where specifically I saw this thread of discussion brought up. But in a recent interview, I believe that's where the info was sourced from, with the author of the Rio's Work Is Never Done light novels.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was by a Western person or outlet, and that's why this came up. They sort of asked about that, and his response was that, like, it's the sort of sexualized fan servicey scenes are, like, purely there for comedic effect, and he said that the Japanese audience consuming it takes it as such. Like, it is both intended to be humorous, and in the context of the audience consuming it, that is how they view the work.
I feel like that's a question dodge, though.
A legitimate difference of interpretation of this stuff, or difference of perception of it, I think, to a degree. And that gets messy when you get other series like Eromanga Sensei, or I believe Tenshi no 3P went this route, where it's more sexualized in a demonstrably gratifying manner.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an element of it where, like, it's just kind of, like, weird and goofy and absurd, and that is the humor of it.
Right. But I'm specifically mentioning stuff like Eromanga Sensei, where no matter how hard you try to spin it as comedy, like, there's very obviously a target demographic for this that we would rather not acknowledge.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is that it's like a different culture there. I think that too is kind of bullshit. Because if I remember reading something that Japan has like the highest like child pornography rates in the world.
Got a source on that?
It may very well, but the interesting thing is they've historically had rather low child sexual abuse / assault rates.
Yes.
And I mean, that can get tough to get data on. You'd have to like really look into it to like do a thorough analysis and see like what the root of that is, whether it's methodological or whether it's reflective of how things actually are. But that's always been the thing. Live action child porn, which they also produce, is obviously unacceptable and a huge issue. But this sort of drawn child porn, both for erotic and perhaps in some cases for humorous intent, doesn't seem to manifest itself into a culture of actually exploiting children, to the same degree that other similar countries do so. Mm-hmm. And I think that does speak to the potential validity of that assertion of a cultural difference of interpretation of this stuff.
I think there's some validity in what you're saying, and I don't have the numbers to back all of this up. I'm going to assume that you do. But the thing that hits me about that argument is that Japanese anime is becoming more and more tailored for an international audience. It's not just contained within Japan. So we have things like Eromanga Sensei, Tenchi no 3P, etc., coming to the United States, to Canada, to Europe, where it is going to be interpreted in such a way. And you can say that you have to view that through a cultural lens. I'll, punch you in the teeth if you do, because I'm tired of hearing that argument. But you can say that you have to look at this the way that a Japanese person would look at it, but at the same time, you're not a Japanese person. You have your ingrained cultural expectations.
Yeah. No, I don't think you have to look at it that way to the exclusion of all else. Mm-hmm. I think in a lot of cases, sort of missing the context of that Japanese basis just misses out on some things. And if we're talking historically, colonialismally, the Japanese have often been perceived and portrayed as having, really Asian people in general, as having these fetishes for children, largely on the back of just women there often being petite. So even lusting after adult women is perceived by, or was perceived by Westerners as pedophilic in and of itself. And so there's a whole messy history that all this stuff gets caught up in. Mm-hmm. And that's why, there's a big segment of the but actually lolly defenders that are dude. But I do think the but actually point, when made with specific framing and intent, is a valid but actually.
Mm-hmm. But actually, you're wrong, and I hate you. No, I don't think you're wrong. I think that when you look at things through this cultural lens, you can find a way to be sympathetic, or at least, more understanding. You can find a way to look at this that isn't terrible, but I don't think we should exclude the way to look at this which is terrible. Yeah, because there is another way to look at it.
The point you aren't Japanese that you made is prescient, specifically in that even if a Japanese audience is interpreting some of this stuff platonically, the increasing Western audience for it without that cultural context may not be doing so. Mm-hmm. And then you get into a discussion of potential negative effects. I'm not big on media causes / influences behavior, but writing off that phenomenon entirely, I think, is foolish as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I also think it's this kind of question of should they censor how they work or how their art is just because it's being perceived further than just the Japan borders. It's one of these things if you can't exactly expect an artist to, like, oh, my work's going to go out to all these people, so I'm going to censor it. For Japanese people and for most artists, like, I don't dub my videos in Chinese because there's a large market in China that would watch my videos.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I make my stuff for America, and if Chinese people happen to watch it, well, good on them. I don't really care how it affects them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
when Bryant said anime is being made increasingly for an international audience, I did want to interject with sort of and to an extent. You sort of get a varied response in interviews with people because did you consider a Western audience, or how did you consider them, or to what extent did you consider them, is a relatively common question at this point in a lot of interviews. And I've seen the whole range of answers with a relatively equal commonality. We very much so took into account the Western audience. We didn't think about them at all, and like any Western viewership or interest in the show is wholly incidental. So just because anime as a whole is getting this greatly increased international clout, that the effects of that on those creating it isn't necessarily manifesting itself universally across the medium.
Okay, well, let me rephrase then, because what I mean to say is that anime is getting more traction in the West,
Right,
and that
yeah.
not thinking about that Western audience when creating anime would be irresponsible on the part of media
Yeah.
creators. So because you are right, of course.
That I figured that's what you were getting at.
Well, I
That's
don't
an
remember if I
interesting
portrayed
one.
it that way or not. But
No,
yeah,
you
I wanted
definitely
to
did.
talk about this more in response to what Matt said about how about whether or not you need to take into account different perspectives
A
than the one
burden
that you're...
incumbent upon creators to sort of guard against different perceptions or interpretations of your work.
I think you just need to be aware of what you're saying. Because, like, there's this idea of that I always keep in my head whenever I make anything, of creating media responsibly.
Right.
Because, like, I have a decently large audience, which means that I have influence. Which means that if I don't keep myself in check and make sure to present what I want to present in an accurate way, I'm going to be spreading misinformation. I'm going to be spreading things that I don't want to spread. So I just have to be aware of what I'm saying and how I'm saying it and all the different ways that could be interpreted by people who are watching my stuff. Like, I was writing a story a while back. This was years ago. And I had two things in mind while I was writing it. One, I didn't want a white protagonist. And two, I wanted a story of a character who was rising above her circumstances to basically get out of the traditions of her society and educate herself and become a better person by basically growing out of her culture. And what that left me with, by necessity, was a society full of backwards brown people who had to be educated to be better.
Yeah.
So you have to look from a distance at what you're creating, because even if you have the best intentions, things don't always turn out that way.
Even
then,
I don't have
feel
to
like
worry
it's-
about that because I have too small of an audience to worry about that.
I disagree. I think if you have any media that's going out into the public, you don't know who's going to be watching it. You don't know who's going to be reading it. I think you should always act like you're going to have a very enormous influence on somebody, even if it's just one person.
Well, but even then, I
Alex
feel like
has
it's
been
kind
trying
of,
to say something for ages, and I just interrupted him.
Well, even then, I feel like
paved
it's
the way
kind of
for him to speak, and you just ended up steamrolling him.
no, but even then, I feel like it's
Go ahead,
it's
Alex.
kind of difficult to.
We've done this gag before. I'm near positive we've done this gag already.
It's still...
No, but even then, it's kind of difficult. I feel to sort of try to consider as like you can consider as many perspectives as you're aware of, but you can't. I don't think it's possible to consider like every single perspective and not risk like offending somebody. So I mean like obviously when I make things, I try to be considerate of what it is that I'm saying, and I try to phrase things in the appropriate way. But I don't know, I could say something in this statement that throws somebody off, and it's just something that I didn't even think of. My words could be twisted out of what they originally were meant to be, or I don't know exactly how I want to phrase it, but
I get what you're saying, but I think what Brian's trying to say is that, pedophilia isn't like something that you can accidentally get twisted or accidentally sort of misunderstand. It's pretty blatant in the shows he's referring to. He's not referring to things like
that's true.
No Game, No Life, where there's a small kind of pedophilia thing going there, but it is used for comedy. It's kind of thrown off to the side.
Yeah.
He's talking about things where it's Eromanga Sensei, where it's like, okay, the guy is clearly trying to sleep with his sister or something like that.
Mm-hmm. How old is she in Eromanga Sensei? Is she 12?
12 is what I want to say.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's something that we need to consider about Japan, because, for better or worse, the age of consent in Japan is 14.
Well, I mean, that gets brought up, but, like, that's the national age of consent, whereas in, like, every prefecture of Japan, I believe, the age of consent is 18.
Interesting.
Or maybe, like, some at 16, but, like, in effect, the age of consent in Japan is not 12 or 14 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, technically in the US, the national age of consent is 12 or something. And then all the states have their... Like, it's a similar situation. So, like, that again, I think is sort of falling into colonialist stereotypes, the sensationalism around Japan's national age of consent.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I wasn't trying to get sensationalist with it.
No. Just
I was just working on bad information, or maybe you were.
The proliferation of that info.
Anyway, what I was going to say with regard to that, keeping your information in mind now, was that back when I assumed that this was just the way things were, I was going to say that, in a country with an age of consent of 14, a 12-year-old would likely be seen in much the same way we see, like, 16-year-olds in the United States. Like, someone on the cusp of sexual maturity who's, like, exploring themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing that I think is worth keeping in mind. Because, like, what I'm not talking about specifically when I mention this kind of show is something like Bigata HK. Where you have Yamada's First Time in English. You have a show about a young person who is explicitly exploring her sexuality as the theme of the show, where it's handled... I've only seen the first episode, so maybe it gets terrible, but from what I've seen, where it's handled in a decently complex and respectful way, with the intent of exploring this person's mentality, not the intent of, like, getting pedophiles hard.
Yeah.
It's a good show, by the way.
Yeah, I've heard. And I'm also not talking about something like Made in Abyss. Because, like, you can have whatever opinion you want about Made in Abyss. I am with Craftsdwarf on this when I say that the nudity in Made in Abyss improves the show. So, because it's not done to titillate, it's done as a means of both showing... I'm trying to remember the protagonist's name. Rico. Showing Rico's relative sense of innocence with regard to the world, making her vulnerable, enhancing the sense of primality in the Abyss. And then, of course, Craftsdwarf went off into this whole thing about Rico's body type, which was very interesting to me. How there are no, like, appealing curves in her character design. As opposed to something like Eromanga Sensei, where there are more curves than girl.
Yeah.
So, I'm not talking about either of those things.
Right.
Yeah. I'm just talking about sickness.
Yeah.
really bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of still on Brian's side here for this thing. I just have a huge thing against the idea of pedophilia, and then I think my main problem with it is that I think it's supposed to be like this kind of edgy thing, like, oh look, they do like this whole thing with the incest, with with borderline rapey shit from Citrus, which we'll talk about later, but also just like, oh look, it's pedophilia. It's kind of this edgy thing. Whereas for us, it's like, okay, that's going too far, because it normalizes what's a real problem in the world.
I mean, it reminds me of that line from Stranger Things where there's a suburban white girl who's trying to rebel, and she's told, you're doing the same thing as every other suburban white girl. It's like, you're trying to be an edgy anime by doing the same thing as everything else that's trying to be an edgy anime.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. Just,
I mean,
dye your producer's hair black like everyone else. You were gonna say something.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's edge that Citrus is necessarily going for.
Oh, not
I mean,
Citrus. Well, okay, maybe Citrus.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't talking about Citrus. Matt might have been.
Well, yeah, I just brought it up as a quick example. I have a lot to say about Citrus this episode, but I wanted to save that for a little bit later.
Yeah. I don't think Citrus is trying to be edgy. I think Sword Art Online was trying to be edgy. I think
Yeah.
WeCross was
No,
trying to
that's
be
fair.
edgy and succeeded.
Yeah.
See, that's one thing. I think we've talked about this before, about incest plots in anime.
Mm-hmm.
Have we talked about this?
I think we have.
It's
I think so.
come up.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with an incest plot. I think it can be a very interesting... Yeah, we did talk about this, because I brought up Game of Thrones, and how I don't see how anybody can be inherently against incest plots when Game of Thrones exists. But, yeah, I think, like, something like Selector WeCross, where the incest plot, like, isn't shied away from, and, like, not fucking backed out of at the last minute, like, oh, she was adopted the whole time.
Yeah.
Or my favorite, oh, she was just your cousin, not your sister.
Oh my God, where was that from?
I mean, what's like our stance on cousin incest? Because that is like a legitimate cultural thing. Like, is that so terrible? Is that like set in stone?
I
For
mean,
me, that's still kind of creepy.
it's for me, like, the only problem with incest is the genetic components, and yeah, cousin on cousin incest isn't like that bad. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
So
What state did you say you were from again?
Kentucky, where cousin on cousin incest is illegal.
All right, continue with your argument.
Oh wait. On the Citrus point, I found it immensely entertaining that of like the 3 or 4 states in the U.S. For whom it was the most watched show according to Crunchyroll state-by-state data, one was Missouri,
Oh, that's right.
which is lesbian incest. It's just like so stereotypically their thing.
Is that surprising?
No, it's not, which was why it was amusing.
No, I mean, you need to look up the most watched kinds of porn statistics for every state in the
that's
union.
true.
Yeah,
Didn't one of the states had hentai? I think actually.
yeah, one of them
Yeah.
did. I forget which one.
I think it was Washington.
Mm-hmm. That's
Canada is they had like one was hentai, I think one was cartoon. They had a bunch of like,
Canadians are
anime
freaks.
porn they're clearly looking for.
No, like, I don't know. I for one am a fan of exploring taboo elements of sexuality as a means of characterization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I made that whole video about sexuality in Watamote,
Yeah.
which wasn't taboo at all, but it was still very, very prevalent. So, just seeing how the whole, like, culture around pedophilia in anime is handled is more the problem to me than its existence.
Right.
Because while The Walking Dead Season 2 by Telltale Games was coming out, there was some discussion about how one of the characters might possibly be a pedophile.
Yeah.
which was immensely interesting to me because, like, the idea of a character who is attracted to someone knowing that their attraction is harmful, both to them and to the person in question, is a pretty, like, incredible and deep character conflict.
Right.
And it, like, tinged all of their interactions with the child protagonist in a way that, like, made you second guess everything that this person said and wonder about them. And, like, and he is still a pedophile in my headcanon. But, like, so I don't think it's a depiction of pedophilia that is the problem. I mean, Lolita is a classic for a reason.
It's an indulgence in
Yes. Exactly. It's the fact that the viewer is expected to be the pedophile, not the character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you guys have anything else you want to talk about with the pedophilia topic before we move on?
Do we?
I think I got everything.
I've
I wanted
gone
to
on
say.
my
We sort
rant.
of cover the range of what there is to discuss.
I mean, we were talking earlier about how we wanted to use this as a segue to talk about homosexual romance shows and how they're all terrible, and then you were going to talk about why Citrus is good now.
Yep. See, wasn't that such a good segue?
I don't know.
You were right.
You said it was supposed to be bad. We're doing a bad segue.
I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Whoever's
That was my
editing this,
mistake.
put up a picture of a broken segue.
Why you gotta do this to me?
Do it.
No, so, I think last week I said Citrus was bad, right?
We didn't remember when you asked us before the show, and we still don't.
Yeah. I wasn't sure either. Well, my opinion has changed. Pedro, you were on point. Holy shit.
Yeah.
You were right. Like, the story, like, episode 5 takes this weird kind of twist, and then it's just like, all of a sudden I love the characters, and I just want them to fucking succeed at everything. Like, the actual narrative, it's neat, because it's kind of like this weird exploration of lust versus love, which I wasn't expecting from the show, because the first 4 episodes were all, like, kind of rapey, like, really pushy. And that's supposed to be, like, the lust portion of the shows. And then episode 5 and 6, I haven't watched 7 yet, have been, like, them finally developing their love, actually falling in love. And it's really cool, because it's, like, it's first, like, tricked into you, like, oh, yeah, it's just sisterly love. But, you know, it's not that way. And it's fucking... It's so perfect. I'm so pulled into this show. I'm so excited for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it like totally justifies it. Like, it isn't a thing where it set up the bad rapey relationship specifically for the payoff of it not being rapey or as rapey anymore. It seems more of just like a transition in approach from the mangaka over the course of the story. But Citrus, as we noted last time we discussed it, had some fantastic elements. So sort of with the evolution past sexual assault driven plotting, you can now appreciate that.
I agree. I'm just so happy that it actually turned. I was watching episode 5. See, here's my thing. I don't know if it's just like if it's gotten really good or if it's just a case of that it set its standards so fucking low that when it became average, I was like, this is so great, because it's just kind of one of those things where it's like I'm heavily enjoying it, but I'm not sure if it's because my standards for it are so low or because if it's actually good. That's my only fear.
I think it's legitimately like decent at this point. Like, I'd give it a 7 out of 10 in terms of like current quality level. Overall, as a series, that rating might be lower just on account of the huge percentage of it that exists of sexual assault, you know, in the first half of the core here. But like, I do think it's legitimately good at this stage.
Well, my question with regard to that is that, okay, let's say it's legitimately good. I haven't seen it. I can't dispute that. If it gets legitimately good at episode 5, after having been basically trash for 4 episodes, is it worth it? Is that acceptable?
I'm like, if you're calling those 4 episodes trash on the grounds of their sexual assault content. That's fair, but like the episodes in many ways weren't bad leading up to this. Like those good elements were always there. So like on a moral level, it's not justified. But if you're talking from like an audience, like just viewer experience perspective, depending upon how much of a minus those are for you, I do think it was solid enough already that if it gets good here, it's like still a decent show.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of content, I think, is a somewhat like separate discussion from its quality apart from that content.
Well, my thing I've been telling everybody is that to me it still failed the 3-episode rule. I was just watching it out of because I was gonna make a video about how it was like destined to fail. I had this whole thing planned. Mm-hmm. So my whole point I've been telling everybody is like, watch it if you're willing to commit 4 episodes. If you're not like, if you have other shows you want to watch and you really don't feel like having to cut through 4 episodes of bullshit, it's kind of like, I don't think it's worthwhile pushing yourself to that. It's like, what was it? The Homestuck thing for a while. So, you have to read the first 100 chapters.
Yeah.
Or first like 1,000 pages, then it gets good.
Yeah, that's basically what I was trying to sort of differentiate this from. I think it's a thing where like the goodness is there already. It's the content, so it's separate from like a Gintama or a Homestuck situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, my question was a lot more hypothetical, because I was talking about things like Gintama and Homestuck. I've never seen or read either, so I might be talking out of my ass with those examples. But the question that comes to mind for me is the good elements that do exist in Citrus is what are they in service of? Because, like you were talking about, Pedro, you said that there was a change of approach from the mangaka, it seems like. Rather than, like, this having been what this has been leading up to this entire time.
I think the sexual assault was gratuitous and indulgent in its presence in the series from the start, not sort of meaningful or reflective.
Right.
So there is that, and that's the big sticking point.
Mm-hmm. So, like, although these good elements do exist, if they're done in service of a story that's mostly created to portray sexual assault in a way that is titillating or acceptable, is that okay?
Sort of because of the developments, it comes around towards like expressing this stance that like sexual assault is bad and unhealthy. Mm-hmm. So I think like it does get redeemed somewhat in that regard. Like the ultimate message is one that takes the correct stance here. A interesting and I think worth noting point that I've seen that I want to reiterate here is the fact that like a lot of times queer media gets like super heavily sort of spotlighted and scrutinized for problematic elements, in part because like a large portion of that audience will be sort of attuned to that kind of stuff. But we see sort of content that's relatively prevalent and something that's allowed to exist in at least relative peace sort of get really honed in on and attacked specifically when stuff isn't cishet. And I did see some people sort of complaining about the fact that like maybe like they just want to have some trash and sort of a range of media expression is something that they should be allowed to have too, which is a perspective that I think is at least worth signal boosting.
Well, naturally I agree, but I also feel like there is a time and place. Because we are basically at the naissance of mainstream queer media coming out of anime. There have been examples in the past, but when it comes to like high-profile stuff and good representations, we're at a point where we have Yuri on Ice and... I mean...
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
want to count Citrus? Really? Is
Well,
this
well,
the
that's,
show that
like-
you want championing your interests in this movement?
The relative dearth of that content makes every individual instance of it sort of so visible and noticeable. 'Cause like far higher priority than Citrus, I love like a dozen great Yuri series that like give me happy, healthy lesbians. But I think in and amongst that, there like could and theoretically should be room for a problematic sort of indulgence of that. And Citrus is at the very least written by a woman. So it's like the sort of male gaze argument towards it or critique of it is off base to an extent. I mean, it's a messy situation, like when you're sort of in the position of championing Citrus, but I think its existence is not nearly as intrinsically an issue as it's necessarily being made out to be.
I do want to add on to that 1 second, just because I know you haven't seen Citrus. It doesn't glorify the sexual assault by any means. It actually punishes it multiple times.
Yeah.
So
it is like it isn't celebratory of it. It's just sort of messy and not good with it.
Right, and if I said it was glorifyingly... If I said it glorified sexual assault, then that was definitely misspoken.
No, you
Yeah,
didn't say that.
I don't
I
think
was
you
just
did.
letting you know that, because I know you haven't seen the show, so you didn't know what in reference to the sexual assault was. Too.
Yeah, of course. So to anybody who's watching us talk in the hallways, listen to Matt and Pedro, not me. Hi,
You
Alex.
guys have-
Hello.
Yeah, Alex.
How's
Alex,
your day
wake up.
been?
Alex, we were talking here. Why are you asleep?
I was awake. I'm a listener. More of a listener than a talker.
Alex, what's your favorite instance of sexual assault in Citrus?
I can't even give an example as like a joke because I haven't seen the show.
Do we want to go for the triple play? We're gonna move on to the MMO junkie Yaginuma.
I don't see why
director
not.
News.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Punch
Studio
Nazis,
Signal
everyone.
MD just recently put out a statement sort of condemning the views expressed by the director of MMO Junkie, which there's the studio for, Yaginuma. They condemned those anti-Semitic sort of neo-Nazi sentiments of his, and through the tone of that reprimand, certainly seemed like they're not going to be working with him in the future, and that is somewhat significant just beyond what you might initially surmise, because Signal MD is a sort of subsidiary of IG Port. So that's Production IG, that's Studio Wit. There's a few other sort of studios there that are connected to each other in varying degrees of looseness. So there may very well be at least some degree of industry blacklisting of Yaginuma that, is now going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I think for sure, because, I mean, in American industry, news travels fast, but in Japanese industry, everything's so interlaced over there.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably pretty fucked.
And I mean, he has been expressing these views for years, so I think the question of, did you just ignore it, and sort of now that it's come up, you have to take action? But also, he had not directed a TV anime production or an anime film until this point in time, so he was not too high profile. His only other directorial credit is from one short film that he did, which is really fucking cool too. I think it was a Studio 4C. It was on one of their short film collections. But yeah, so he only got this degree of visibility after directing MMO Junkie here, which is probably why this reaction has come so relatively late.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wonder if Jeff's video had a big role in it. Because I know, didn't he get a comment from either the production company or the actual guy who was the director?
Yeah, Yaginuma like quote tweeted like Jeff's "my video's posted" thing with like his thoughts on the video, and I think he commented on the video as well.
Huh.
I mean, the type of person he is, they're just gonna revel in any and all sort of attention that they get.
Karma's a bitch.
What the comments say.
It's tough to recall, in part because his English is
Right.
pretty broken. So it was somewhat gibberishy, but he was like just saying like whatever, like you're a coward and I'm right, and such things.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's
That's
no
what he
arguing
gets for
with
blocking my video. No, but I mean, I think this is a good thing. It's people finally standing up for, getting punished, which is ironic because it happens right after he directs a very successful show, which leads to people seeing the true side of him, and then probably being kicked out of the community completely.
that. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Japan certainly has its struggles with strong nationalist sentiments, but those sentiments still are not going to fly in the mainstream, at least to the extent which Yaginuma was expressing them.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy about it. Like, I'm not one bit disappointed about it, man.
Mm-hmm.
Here is a link to that short film of his, by the way.
All right.
If you want to like include it in the description of the video. It's got a really cool aesthetic, and it's got animation by Ko Yoshinari, who you'll be familiar with as the monster designer from Made in Abyss, and the guy who did those really distinctive animation for those creatures in the points in time where those really stood out.
I'm imagining you like digging through your backpack, getting like a giant stack of sheets of paper to hand out to the Boru's Here's a link. You can click on this link.
Here's
I've
some of the
seen,
racist
like,
tweets he's posted.
Every Sakuga Boru entry for Ko Yoshinari, so that's how I found out about this film.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like a giant index, aren't you? Like, seriously, God, I can't imagine knowing that much stuff about literally any subject in my life. Anyway, do you guys have any seasonal updates you want to talk about?
Seasonal updates, you say?
Seasonal updates.
Seasonal. Let me check my anime
week,
list.
Starling and the Franxx was pretty dope. Big action spectacle scene, and like they've got the production to just pull that off. Which was neat. Just like a really impressive volume of action animation, especially considering it's a 2-core series, and especially considering that the preceding episodes here were also pretty strong production-wise. It isn't as if they, were clearly taking their foot off the gas to leave some fuel in the tank for this week's episode. That's a nice little metaphor I did there. That worked out.
Good job.
I'm very happy with that. Very self-satisfied.
Yeah, I didn't catch this week's yet, so I'll have to get on that.
Yuru Camp is still probably the best show of the season.
No.
Personally, I dropped a whole bunch of stuff and ignored some others just because I really gotta slim up my seasonal following here.
No. Yuru
Precure
Camp
is still great.
Is very good.
Everyone watch Precure.
Precure. Oh, I
Go
haven't caught
fucking
up
watch
with,
it. It's a good show. Watch Freakier.
I haven't caught up with whatchamacallit, the Rain show.
After the Rain.
That's one of the few that I'm not caught up with either. I caught the first 3 here.
Yeah, I'm caught up with it. It continues to be good.
Yeah.
That's nice to know.
Heard.
Yeah, they have some
Evergarden-
really great directing in that show. Plus, of course, the art is beautiful.
Yeah. Violet Evergarden. I think like our last update was episode 3, which I at the very least was framing as something that sort of like proved the potential of it, and like this is a good show.
I'm still on
and
episode 3.
It has continued to sort of assert itself as such. Episode 5 was a real highlight. It had storyboarding from Yamada Naoko, and it was directed by, I believe, Taichi Ishidate, who's like the
Those are
disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya director and all that stuff. He's one of the big good names.
I mean, of course, I know Yamada Naoko. But...
Yeah, basically the studio faces came in and they handled that episode, and it was a real highlight because of it.
Place Further Than the Universe.
Yeah, continued to be excellent. That's like a top 5 easily this season.
I think it might be my number 1 pick this season.
Yeah.
It was definitely my number 1 for a while, but I'm just at this point it's like a coin flip.
You've come
between
around
that
on
and-
Takagi-san.
No.
Good to hear.
I was.
What is
gonna,
it a coin flip between?
Between A Place Further Than the Universe and Yudu Camp, because they're
Yeah,
both solid.
my boy.
Like every time
Yudu Camp
Nadeshiko
is
is on
great.
screen, like I'm always smiling, and I can't stop. She's too good.
Yeah.
Gotta
And not
watch
many-
Your Camp. I keep pulling it up, and then like something happens, and I fucking like go walk away and do
It's
something
so
else.
watchable.
I mean,
it's so
to be
great.
fair, Alex, that is how I feel about Takagi. I just
That-
can't
that-
stop
that's fair.
smiling through that whole show.
That's fair. I mean,
have
like
continued following Takagi in spite of my like relatively strict sort of standards being held to this season. So I think that speaks to the quality of the show.
It's
The funny thing is, like with
so
Takagi,
perfect.
I know I said that it's probably a better manga than an anime, but I still haven't gone out to read the manga, so I'm like, well, I might just pick up the anime again.
Yeah, it probably is. I would think like there's not much that would be lost in the manga format, and it'd tighten up the joke structure for sure, and the pacing generally.
I don't know. I like that it feels like it drags a little bit.
No, that's definitely something that it sort of adds to it.
Would certainly
No,
increase
it's just
that, like,
really sweet, and you can sit back and relax and just watch these two adorable people. Almost people. Oh, we haven't talked about the best show of the season yet, Dame X Prince Anime Caravan.
Okay.
Dame X Prince Anime Caravan continues to be the best show of the season. That is all.
Oh yeah, this is your.
This is my
Oh,
King's
yes.
game this season, yeah.
Have fun with that. I refuse.
Oh, I am having fun with it. Evan and I are having
Studio
a lot of fun with it.
Flawed. I like
Studio-
that just based on the studio
I'm
name.
sorry,
it's
Studio
the first
Flawed?
Flawed, Flad. Dame X Prince Anime Caravan is the first production from this studio Flawed.
Well, they're doing wonderful. I wish them well.
Flawed.
I love the first review on Mal. It's like, the show is all over the place. The characters,
are bland
bland.
for the most part, falling into generic stereotypes and then overplaying those roles. There seems to be the vague resemblance of a plot line, but it's unclear and jumps around a lot. Do you know about those dice that have a different word/action on each side? I feel like that perfectly resembles this show. Each character has a die with actions matching their personality traits, and whatever the die lands on becomes the next thing to happen.
That's so fucking
No,
rude.
Oh, wait,
You
only
missed
one
the
more
best line.
There isn't much I can find that would redeem this show. It just is what it is. Thank you, Subterfuge on Mal.
It's
Thank you.
wonderful. It is what it is, and what it is the best.
Oh wait, the second review is a 10 out of 10 though.
Oh god, that's wrong.
Good.
The protagonist is actually lovable and doesn't just sit there and take it. She's a hilarious deadpan snarker who thinks the princes are crazies and shows it. The boy's actually acting character for once. The narcissist stays narcissistic. The flirty one flirts with every other girl as well. The Shota is Shota. And the otaku does actually like anime girls better than the protagonist. And they talk to each other about things other than the protagonist. Nobody has fallen in love with the girl at first sight simply because she's beautiful. Nobody has fallen in love with her at first sight at all. In fact, she read more. In fact, she read more.
I mean,
she actually has to work to befriend one of the boys.
Is very much in this given reviewers' wheelhouse here.
Mm-hmm.
Looking through things, they gave Love Stage a 9 out of 10.
Oh, fuck you. Fuck you, Prolixity.
Servamp, which I believe was Yaoi from a few seasons back, got a 10 out of 10.
Oh my god.
So, I mean, good for them. They've got their tastes.
I mean, I do think that Dame X Prince is better than people are making it out to be.
Free is a 9 out of 10.
I wonder if it's a Fujoshi.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Tune in for our
Updates
next
from the
hallway
Shonen
chat
Show
where
boy.
we just go through Mal and we just roast
Going
people.
through Mal profiles.
Just roast people.
No, I
I'm
mean,
sure
Dame
someone
X
could make
Prince
that
is like
into,
a
like, a
7 out of 10
legitimately-
at best, but I feel like most people are treating it like a 5, and it's not that.
I feel like you could make like a legitimately solid podcast concept out of that.
Just arguing
go.
about,
Bully
roasting
people
people
on
on
Reading
that.
Mal
Okay.
profiles. I mean, but Mabim Bam can do it just by reading Yahoo Answers questions, so I think there's potential there.
Am I pregunate?
So Overlord Season 2 is improving. It's not great, but it's getting there, in my opinion.
Okay.
And the Death March show continues to be just like super generic isekai, but like once again doesn't like overstep any boundaries. And it's like,
Aw.
if you want to watch it, it's perfect. It's like the most generic. If you just want a classic, about as stereotypical show as you can get, that doesn't do anything ridiculous that piss you off. That's it. I mean,
For updates on my choice mediocre stereotypical fantasy light novel anime of the season, Gancrest Senki has also continued to be pretty solid. Fairly impressive displays of production prowess, honestly. Like, it gets rough and messy in spots, but manages to have a pretty high frequency of duels or large-scale battles or even a dance sequence that like are animated and move. Unlike so many TV anime productions, like, don't sort of fail to represent the things that are occurring sufficiently for you to sort of get the joy you should get from being able to experience these cool things.
Mm-hmm. What else even exists? Hakame and Mikochi is still a thing.
Still good.
Yeah, I've still only seen the first episode.
Same. I need to catch up.
I don't know. I'm just excited for next season still. I've just been drooling over next season. Gakuen Babysitters. I haven't watched this yet, but one of my friends tells me I have to get drunk with him and watch it.
I think that's fair.
It's a pretty highly rated 7.78, and I've seen like a lot of good stuff, both in terms of like reactions to it from people and little excerpts from it that like look pretty promising.
I heard it's just yaoi bait with cute kids, and when you're drunk,
I
it's
don't
cool.
think that's
Whoa,
true.
Sounds good to me.
I think there's a little bit more to it than that. It's definitely a show for people who like cute boys and children. So, like, anybody who was missing a father figure growing up is going to love this show.
There you go.
But no, it's not bad. Again, it's another show that you just want to sit back and, like, watch and feel good.
Fair enough.
And it's decent at doing that.
Ooh.
Oh.
We're gonna get a Hot Butler show next season.
Hot Butler show? As long as it's not Black Butler, I'm okay.
Butlers. Chitose Momotose Monogatari. Silverlink original, so it's not like based on anything.
The Monogatari series has gotten weird.
Has gotten weird.
It was weird from the start. That's the ECO theme, baby. Everyone go.
Ooh, they
read
have new
Zydeco,
art
though.
up
Those
for
are,
Boku
like,
no Hero Academia Season 3.
legitimately entertaining stuff.
What about Hero Aka Season 3?
They have new art up.
Ooh,
I haven't seen that yet.
Cool.
It's so pretty.
I need to read the manga for that so that I can know what videos I'm going to make ahead
Got a
of time.
pre-game.
Yeah.
Same.
When's the next?
Later. Later.
Huh. The
This is some
second
good
recommendation from Mal for the third season of My Hero Academia is the Girls in Panzer film.
What?
Girls in Panzer is a fantastic show, and
Yeah.
the film is great too. So
Yeah. No,
I
it's
agree.
just an interesting. The fifth rec is Flying Witch.
What?
Shares many points of appeal with your academia, I guess. Also, like a legitimately great show. Everyone should go watch Flying Witch. Whoa, why isn't it added to my Mal? That's weird.
I also see Monster Musume in the recommendations for Hero Aka. Because I guess, like...
I mean, they both have monster girls, so that's fair.
Technically.
Monster Musume. God bless. Whoever made that
Which
show.
girl specifically are you calling a monster, Pedro?
The pink girl has monster girl appeal, I would think.
You hear that,
physiologically.
Mina fans? Pedro both thinks your best girl is a monster and can't remember her name.
Oh,
She's
rough.
got the antenna in the eyes, so classic monster girl appeal.
Mm.
Ooh. Is there a hot vampire show too? Dang.
Ooh.
Hitting all the niches.
Evan's gonna
next
make me
season.
watch that.
Spring 2018 is lit. Probably.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
I'll
Yeah,
have
it
to watch
sounds
so much
like the
anime.
best season that's happened since I started watching seasonal anime.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure if it's
it-
gonna be the best. It's just gonna have the most. Oh wait, it's got Lupin Part 5. Never mind, it's gonna be the best. Yeah.
Anyway, you guys, you have anything else to say before we
Oh, and the
head
new
back to
fucking
class?
Cutie Honey show. God, so much classic. Did
I
you,
think we're all right.
absolutely insane. It's disgusting, actually.
All right, guys, I think it's about time to go back to class.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for watching. This has been Manime Matt.
And explanation point.
And Pedantic Romantic. That's me.
And Sword
And that's
Art
everyone.
Online.
Good. I'm glad to see Alex finally woke up again. Did you just like not sleep last night?
I have been... I don't know where I was going with that.
Fucking original Studio Bones
okay?
series next season.
All right. Well, I'll see you guys.
Bye.
Peace.